Today we're going to talk about multiplication as scaling. We're going to use lots of mental math as it's a great strategy to figure out our answers. But before we do that, let's review some fraction values. Here I have a proper fraction, a fraction that represents one whole, and an improper fraction. Think about which of these is the largest value and which of these is the smallest value. Our proper fractions represent values less than one whole. If your numerator and denominator are the same digit, that represents one whole, and then improper fractions represent fractions larger than one whole. You can also represent improper fractions as mixed numbers. So think about these values as we apply them to multiplication scenarios. Here I have a fraction times a fraction. This is a proper fraction, and this is a fraction that represents one whole. So let's estimate what we think our product will be. Well, I know that 3/3 is the same as one whole. So 1/5 times one whole is going to remain 1/5. That means when you multiply fraction times one whole, your value is going to stay the same, just like multiplying by 1. When I multiply a fraction times a fraction, now both of these fractions represent things less than one whole. 1/5 times 1/3, you just multiply across, and I get 1/15. If I think about the original value here, the original fraction I have is 1/5. 1/5 is larger than 1/15, because remember, the bigger the denominators, the smaller the pieces that you have. If you have one piece out of 5, these are going to be larger pieces, so this is my larger value. That means when you multiply a proper fraction by a proper fraction, your end product is actually going to get smaller. This is kind of a different concept with multiplying whole numbers, because we know that's kind of the opposite with whole numbers. Here I have a fraction times an improper fraction. Remember, these represent values greater than 1. So you're multiplying a fraction times something bigger than 1. When you multiply across, I get 8/30. So you're thinking, is this value greater than or less than what I started with, 1/5? Well, if I compare these fractions, 1/5 is actually less than 8/30. That means when you multiply a fraction times an improper fraction, your product is getting larger. If you're not sure about this, you can use a strategy called cross multiplication and kind of check it out. If you use cross multiplication, 5 times 8 is 40. 30 times 1 is 30. That means since 30 is less than 40, that means 1/5 is less than 8/30. Let's look at another example. Which equation would give the largest product? Here I have the number 4 being multiplied by a different fraction in each of these problems, being multiplied by an improper fraction, a proper fraction, and a fraction that represents one whole. Well, I know out of all these fractions, 9/6 has the greatest value, so it's safe to estimate that 4 times 9/6 would give the largest product. Let's take a look at it worked out just so you can see. When you multiply 4 times 9/6, you get 36/6, and 36 divided by 6 is 6. When you multiply 4 times 1/6, my answer remains 4/6. Since 6/6 is the same as one whole, 4 times 1 is 4. I can see that my largest product is 6, so this gives me my largest product.